Hey guys, welcome back for the second part of the Indie Heroes collection. Like I said before, this might come out this week because I quite frankly just don't have as much time on my hands. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dive right into this one and kind of go over the rest of the cart. There's still quite a few good games on this cart in my opinion, and there might be some more on here that you like that I'm not particularly fond of. It just depends on your particular preference. But hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of this, so let's dive right in. Now, here's where the card starts to go downhill a little bit for me. This one's called Foxy Land. And there's something about this that I just don't like. And there's a few things about it, actually. One, the stage design seems kind of uninspired. The enemies are very few and mostly seem to be like either platforms that fall, that drop you into spikes, or little things that shoot arrows at you. Later on, there's some frogs that are kind of annoying to jump on because they move in weird ways. There's some platforms where I fell down into some pits, and until I realized I could double jump, I was like, why didn't you just insta-kill me? Because there seems to be no way out of this pit. Which is another thing that the game kind of does wrong. Doesn't really explain that you can use a double jump mechanic until later on, because you never need it until about stage 4 or 5. So you go through that much of the game, or at least I did, thinking, okay, I had the one single jump, that's fine, it's a little boring, and the animations aren't great, but whatever, I'll work with it, it's fine. As you go through the stages. And the idea is to collect all 3 of the gems in the stage to open up the exit to get out of the stage. There's a number of, like, cherries that you can pick up, which, after you get so many of those, will unlock a crate that gives you an extra life. And it will give you an indicator at the end of the stage of how many cherries there were, how many you collected. Collect all of them, it unlocks a lock on a rotating box. Once you do that 5 times, it'll give you another life. Might be a problem with this was unintuitive and designed where it didn't feel like I should need a double jump, but needed one at one point. So the stage design didn't lead to me learning that as organically until I just accidentally did it, and then I realized the solution to my problem. Which is kind of explaining it, but it's later in the game that it felt like it needed to be, because there's early places you could have used it that I found ways around it, or realized I could jump in a certain way and get there. It didn't need it. The character design is bad. It looks kind of like somebody took Fox and Forest, the fox from there, and hit him with a mallet to squish him to less than half his size. It's like Fox from Fox and Forest's retarded cousin. It's just not a very good design. The stage design itself is kind of samey in a lot of ways, and fairly boring and drab after the first couple stages. It doesn't really have any sense of joy or full-on passion out of it. And I hate to say that about a homebrew game, primarily because it seems like it should have been designed with a lot more care and love in it, like somebody really wanted to do a project. That's kind of what I want and expect out of homebrews, is not the best thing graphically, but a lot of passion dropped into what they're doing. That's why I want to support projects like that. This is available pretty much freaking everywhere. You can get it on any platform that exists, or you can play it for free through multiple browsers online. I don't really recommend this one. If you want to play it, don't spend money on it. Just play it on one of those sites and be done with it. Or do yourself a favor, just don't play it. It's uninspired, it's drab, it's boring, its animations are lame, its monsters aren't great. It just doesn't bring any joy at all. I was really just disappointed. It's not broken in any way, it's perfectly serviceable. I just don't find it fun. Here's the one I really didn't want to do because I feel bad. This is Kubo 3, and I hate saying this. I don't like this one, and the reason I hate to say this is it's a mom and dad team. It's a father-daughter team that made this game, and I love that. I absolutely do. I just don't like the game. I don't like the character design. I don't really like the stages. I don't really like the animation. The jumping is fine, it's serviceable, but the stages are so basic. Everything is so basic. It looks it was made for the NES, but if you hadn't told me it was made for the NES, I would have thought that this was supposed to be an Atari game if the chiptune on it hadn't been as good as it was. Because the chiptune is actually really advanced, while graphically it seems almost Atari level graphically. Like, if not Atari, like, I would say Intellivision or ColecoVision. On the early end of the spectrum, not on the later end of the spectrum where they were closer to the NES in fidelity when the NES first came out. There's nothing, again, particularly wrong with this game. I made it through the air stage and got the gem out of there. The idea is to beat 4 different worlds and collect a gem out of each one of them to save your friends that were imprisoned by a guy in town, and he'll only give them back to you if you retrieve all these and give them to him. It seems to only have those 4 stages. It's got an overworld that links you to the various different stages, which you do most of your side-scrolling platforming on. And it's a cute idea. It's got a pretty neat execution. Everything plays pretty well. I don't like some of the erratic movement of the monsters. I don't really care for the art style. It mentioned shooting, but there's no shooting. Like, it says one button is shoot, but it doesn't do anything. Ever. That I can tell in the game. Like, it might drop a block or something, because I know there's an underwater stage where you wouldn't necessarily be able to jump because you're swimming. So, maybe that allows you to, like, pick up things and drop them. Maybe that's their idea of shoot. I don't know. I didn't get too deep into it. I played it a few times. Matter of fact, I think I played it more than I did some of these others, because I really wanted to like it. I just couldn't bring myself to like it. This may be right up your alley if you liked a lot of those Atari-style games and you want something that reminds you of that history while still having some of the modern sounds and advantages of the NES at the same time. This might be right up your alley. It just wasn't for me in particular, which makes me sad because I love the fact that it was like a father-daughter team making it together. I think that's amazing. Oh, and the reason the guy's green is because he's a turtle. Yeah, in case you didn't know, he's a turtle. So he's green because he's a turtle. No, if they made him a ninja instead of a cowboy, I might have been more down for it. Make him a ninja and boar. Maybe I'll really like boar. Alright, we're starting to come to an end of this, I think. Kind of, sort of. There's a lot of games on this cart. This one's called Ploid. This was made by a small team that wanted to do an NES-style game and funded this one on Kickstarter. It looks like it's a team of about 5 to 7 people that worked on this one that wanted to do a physical release of an old-school NES game. The gameplay is not great. It's not my favorite. I don't like how the jumping feels. The shooting has a limited range. The enemies feel kind of uninspired, the power-ups don't last very long, and the level design is very, very basic. I'm not a huge fan of this. It kind of feels like they could have put more personality and fun into this if they had really wanted to. I've seen plenty of NES games with great jumping dynamics, fantastic shooting mechanics, better range, better character design, better level design, and it kind of faltered. It felt like they wanted to do a Mega Man style game, but they missed what made Mega Man fun in the process. I got through the tutorial stage and most of the first stage. I think I got to the first boss a time or two on it, and I wasn't sure how to approach him. My weapon had no range to really be able to deal with him and give me any flexibility, and it just made for it, and it just wasn't fun. I wasn't enjoying any of the mechanics up to that point enough to want to really dive into this one heavily to really kind of get better at it and explore more of it. It might get more interesting as you beat a few stages in it. Some of you guys can probably tell me in the comments on what your experience was with this one. I found it fairly underwhelming, just by character design, enemy design, and stage design, not to mention the fact that the jump was so short. I felt like I could do a better jump than my hero could do, and the gun had all of the range of, like, Link from Zelda 2. It was a very, very short range weapon. It was more like a shotgun than an actual like blaster like Mega Man or anything like that. So for that reason, I can't really recommend this particular game, which is fine because there's plenty of other great games on here that make this a very good collection. This is just not one of the stronger titles on here. I wasn't super impressed with it in any respect. Next one up is Quest Arrest. This is kind of an interesting title, and I'm kind of two minds on this one, because I love the concept of it. You play as a young female detective who just got made a detective, and your job is to basically police and find crimes to investigate and solve murders and other such crimes, and deal with like petty offenses like loitering and breaking and entering and all that other stuff, harassment, assault, all that kind of thing. So essentially what you do is you get sent on patrol once you get your 2 walkie-talkies, and you interact with people like to find out what's going on in the area. You might run into people that are trying to do breaking and entering, and you end up in a confrontation, which ends up in an RPG style combat, where you have your turn-based, almost Pokemon stylized combat, where you can use one of 2 methods. You can either go lethal and use your gun, or you can use things like pepper spray and a taser to try to wear down and subdue opposing person, and then go through a small little mini game in order to actually arrest them. Now, you can do this either way. You can either just kill them or you can arrest them, and that changes the amount of credibility you have in the town. So you can go full bad cop, shoot everybody, abuse witnesses, do whatever you want, and have a bad credibility rating on it, and people will react to you based off that credibility. Or you can go good cop, politely question people, do your homework on it, try to tase and subdue everybody, that kind of thing, and bring people in and try to keep your credibility high. Your stats are affected accordingly, and I think the weapons that you use gain priority based off that credibility. So like if you lean towards the pepper spray and the taser and you bring people in, you're going to get more effective with those than you would with, say, shooting everybody, which is quite frankly vastly easier to just shoot people in this game, which is part of my problem with the game. Is the criminals are half the people in this game or more are hostile, and so they will literally just start beating the crap out of you, and some of them do a lot of damage, and they do more damage with their attacks than you can do with your pepper spray and your taser, making you really want to lean into using the gun to try to bring them down, which will make you lose credibility. And I understand that that's kind of what the developer wanted to go for. He wanted you to kind of be in that gray area and make that moral choice. Am I going to die? Do I need to use my firearm to defend myself? Or can I still subdue this criminal? So it's a very clever idea, but it leaves a lot to random chance on how the enemy attacks you and whether or not you can keep your credibility high. So you might go through an encounter 4 times, and 3 of the times the guy beats you to death by pistol whipping you while you're trying to tase him, and then you're finally able to like get lucky rolls or get the right attacks out of him where he does less damage than you do, and you can take him down. Or you just finally give up and use your gun, which affects your credibility rating. So if you're going for a full good rating, it's far more difficult than if you just wanted to go the bad cop route. And I feel like it could have used a little bit better balance on that, or ways to kind of force the encounter in certain ways, or to talk your way out of encounters. Not that the Game Boy's really capable of that, but I think it might have been for a more interesting experience. Again, I haven't gotten too deep into this game. On the surface, I kind of like it. I like what it's trying to do. It's a little confused as far as tone, because it comes off as a very kid-friendly, hey, being a cop is fun, but being a cop is hard. And then you'll have somebody basically tell you to F off in like another sentence. So it wants to be kid-friendly and kind of Pokemon, but it also wants to be very adult at times, which makes it a little confusing. I would not recommend it for your kids, just for that reason, because it can be a little hostile with some of the dialogue that it presents and some of the choices it presents for a younger audience. This is more for the nostalgia crowd, for like people that grew up with Game Boy and Game Boy Color to experience and have a more kid-friendly yet adult game, if that makes any sense at all. It's interesting. It's worth a try to see if you like it. You may have mixed results like I do, but overall, I think it's for a single person developed game, it's really well thought out. I think it's very clever. So here's another one that I didn't initially like, but I decided to give it a second chance and liked it much better. That's Super Homebrew Wars. Now, the premise on this one is to basically give you a Smash Brothers style game on an 8-bit console, i.e. the NES is what they chose. Now this does 1 to 4 players, which is interesting because you would need the 4-player tap in order to do that if you got it on a physical console. I don't know how many people actually have that thing, much less have one that still works, but it's a cool idea regardless. The gameplay is pretty simple. The main way of killing people is to either pick up an item and use that item against them, or to land on top of their head, i.e. just jump on top of their head like you would Mario style. The stages are laid out and look like stages from each one of the various different games that have participants in there, which is quite a cool idea and clever from an artistic design. I found it a little bit on the limiting side though, because I like games like Smash, but I like them because each one of the characters kind of has their own individual attacks and combos that they can do, along with like block and dodge mechanics. This has a dash mechanic that would operate in a very similar manner that you can use, but primarily you're just kind of like dropping through the stage and falling back down until you can kind of land on somebody's head. There's no death from falling off the stage. You literally have to like either execute somebody with a weapon or land on top of their head to gain a point. And you play till whoever gets the number of points. It'll do anywhere from like 1 to 4 players, which is cool, and it's kind of a fun, neat little game. I don't think it's one I'll dump a lot of time into, because I don't see the crowd that I hang out with wanting to spend a lot of time playing this game that way. And especially if you were to play this on, say, the Evercade, it would be very difficult for you to do multiplayer on this at all. It'd be mostly a single player experience, which is why I recommend that if you do have this game and you have a VS, just hook it up to a VS and hook up a couple controllers. Maybe you and a couple buddies will have a lot more fun with it when you're doing 4-player on the VS, and it would be a good use of the VS, because the VS honestly just and Evercade in general doesn't have a whole lot of games that do 4-player that I've seen so far. So this makes it one of the few games that you could actually do 4-player on, which might be worth just having this card alone, just to have at least a 4-player game you can play in your VS. I'm sure it would look good on TV, and you guys would probably have a lot of fun jumping on top of each other, getting the various different items and things like that once you started getting a feel for it. The avatars are basically what they are. They almost have no difference in playability from what little I could find, other than the fact that the way they move on the stage is slightly different from one another. But that really doesn't affect the way the game plays very much. So it's an interesting title. It would be a nice party game, like diversion kind of thing, and breaks up some of the RPG and platformer heaviness of the cart, which is kind of fun. Oh, also, almost forgot to mention, you can download this one for free from Bite the Chili Productions website. So if you have an emulator or a flash card or anything like that, and you want to put it on original OG hardware with a 4-player tap, something like that, you can do that too. So that's actually kind of cool. You don't actually have to pay a dime for this if you don't want to. However, I do recommend paying them something, a Patreon or something, if you can find it, or buy the cart, just to support them and give them a little bit of money, because they put a lot of time and effort into this. I swear, we're almost done. We're almost done. It's a big cart, and I kind of want to cover it right. This one's called Twin Dragons. I had seen this one before. A buddy of mine named Jim was streaming it one day, and I was pretty excited for this one to be on the cart, because I'd actually heard of it and seen it played before, and it looked like a lot of fun. And I was not wrong. This is a pretty cute little platformer. It can get kind of tough as nails pretty early, particularly in the second stage where you start running on ice. But it's a lot of fun. It's neat, it's creative, it's got a fun art style. Being able to breathe fire and how the distance on that and the different move speeds of the enemies and creativity of their designs is pretty cool. I had a lot of fun with this one. I like the fact that there's the chili power-up, which I think is, and I think this one, no, this is not done by Bite the Chili Productions. I was thinking it'd be great if it was done by Bite the Chili Productions, because it's just a big chili that lets you do a big fireball, and that'd be fantastic. But it's not done by them. But regardless, this is a neat little platformer title if you're looking to get into another platformer. Don't have any flight mechanics, it's all done on like basic platforming. The stage design is pretty good, it's actually quite creative. There's like rope pulleys that move platforms, there's platforms that aren't stable, there's sheer drops, there's platforms you can drop through, there's a lot of different mechanics going on. It's more like an NES, a good NES level platformer that I really wanted Floyd to be, that it kind of turned out not to be in the end because it was trying to be too much Mega Man on platforming and didn't really get the Mega Man feel right. This worked much, much better as a game overall. Even the first boss is actually kind of tricky, because it's like this gigantic cactus thing that shoots like 3 bolts at you at a time, and finding a way to dodge them based off where his head is that actually fires at any given time can be a little tricky until you get used to it. The second stage is where the game started getting a little on the frustrating side, because the physics mechanics for the ice itself are a little overly touchy. Like, if you were to jump and be pressing forward on the jump and land while you're still pressing forward, you will fly right off of the platform. So what you have to do is kind of play very ginger with the controls, which you would have to do on an ice level, but not nearly to this extent a lot of times. This one's very sensitive. So if you jump, you need to kind of position yourself in the air to land on the platform where you want, and then kind of inch your way forward so that you can make like your next jump. It's a very precision platformer, almost to the extreme, which could make the game fairly challenging. However, it's a good solid game with a great theme, good level design, good controls. I think it's absolutely worth spending some time on to see if you fall in love with it. It's a great indie title that was made for the NES. I think you can still download it digitally, but I do not think you can get a physical copy of this anymore. I was not able to find any place where you could just download this just to put it into an emulator, and I think it runs somewhere between like £5 and £8. So it's a good solid title. It's worth having. I like the fact that I now actually have a physical copy of this game that I can play, and it's another one of those that makes this cart a thumbs up from me. The last one here is kind of, to put this bluntly, this is Urchisen. I don't like it. Nothing about this game grabbed me. It felt a little slow, the shooting felt kind of bad, the levels felt kind of uninspired and kind of lazily designed. It had the same boss for each gateway through the entire first stage, which I had to loop like 4 or 5 times. It felt like somebody tried to make an NES game, but made the level design more like an Atari game, just with slightly better graphics, and it just didn't flow or work for me as a shmup at all. There's so many good shmups on the NES platform. Why you would bring this out and consider this a worthy addition to the NES, or well fleshed out in any way, I don't understand. There's so much more you can do with this hardware. There's so much better level design you can do with this hardware. This felt like it was kind of an afterthought game that got tied in with Ploid, because it's part of that series, as like a retro shooter that they just wanted to pack in with it, and didn't really want to spend a lot of time on it. And it shows. It lacks a lot of joy and inspiration. It lacks any kind of love and care that would normally go into a project like this. It doesn't have any passion or soul. I can't get behind it. I can't really recommend it. This is one that you'll have on the cart and you might boot it up once and go, and probably never play it again. After I've played it a couple times for this, I don't want to touch it again. I don't think I'll ever boot this one up on this cart again. Luckily, the cart has more games that make up for this in the long run. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the rest of this, and it at least kept your attention a little bit. I know this one was kind of long, and that's kind of why I split it into 2 parts. Hopefully it was worth your time, and hopefully you enjoyed the content on it. If you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, notify bell. You know what to do. Either way, thanks for spending some time with me out of your day, and until next time, happy gaming.